Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this talk. So I'll be talking to you about building high-performance, type-safe GraphQL APIs with Strawberry and Django. And first of all, I have 35 years old. I am from Brazil. You will notice Brazilian accent in my speech from time to time. I've been developing Python solutions for at least 13 years now, working mostly with GraphQL solutions together with Django for the past 5 years. I am also a core developer of the Strawberry GraphQL API, and also the official maintainer of the Strawberry Django integration. So let's start. First of all, what is GraphQL? GraphQL is basically a query language for APIs to fulfill runtime for fulfilling those queries with your existing data. It basically provides a way for you to define what your API looks like, and it gives clients the power to ask exactly for what they want. Here is a meme in the GraphQL community, so a burger comparison. I think it's a very nice comparison to compare it to other approaches like REST. So for example, if you have a REST API which retrieves a cheeseburger, you can ask I want a cheeseburger, and you'll get everything in there. With GraphQL, you can define a query to get the cheeseburger, and the client can ask whatever he wants to retrieve. So in this case, he's asking to retrieve the bun, the lettuce, the patty, and also the bun is here 2 times. I got this image from this place. I didn't notice that. But and the cheese, but it's keeping the cheese if it is vegan, and also the patty can be vegan or not. And you will see that if he wanted, he could also ask for the tomatoes, the onions, or not even include the lettuce for some reason. So this is a nice way to represent the difference between REST and GraphQL. So the main pros when using GraphQL and why I am using that so much. REST APIs, you'll know that you have, you sometimes have issues with underfetching or overfetching. Sometimes you just need 1 or 2 informations from a resource, and you get all or nothing. And if you want more, you need to make even more requests. So with GraphQL, you don't have that. GraphQL forces you to define the type of everything, so the API is very type safe, and it also provides an automatic documentation for it. No endpoint redundancy, because you can expose because the client can choose what he wants to consume. You don't need this is an endpoint for a full cheeseburger, and this is for a half cheeseburger. So using the comparison from before. Easy access to relations, because your data will form, like your schema will be a graph. So if you have I have users and the users have friends, so the friends are a relation to some other users, and he is part of a group which is another relation, and you can basically retrieve everything without having to make a lot of queries to do that. And no API versioning required. You can basically deprecate anything. You can deprecate types, you can deprecate attributes, and it will also be automatically documented on your schema. The only cons, of course, there are some. There is a steep learning curve. REST is very straightforward. You use get, you use post, you use put in an API, and you know what you are expecting from it. But GraphQL, you need to understand a bit more about how to write GraphQL queries, and it's not very difficult, but there is a steep curve in that. Caching is more complicated. You can't just cache GET requests. There are potential security concerns if you don't map your relations correctly, and potential performance issues if your relations are not handled properly. But don't fear those cons. Strawberry is here for you, as you will see in my next slides about Strawberry. So how does Strawberry works? I will give a brief explaining about how Strawberry does things, and then how the Strawberry Django integration does. So in here we have an example. I used this event as an example. Oh my God, I misclicked it here. I'm sorry about that. So I wanted to use this. So in here, you see that I am defining the type event, a type user, and a talk. So those are types, and inside them there are attributes. So the name is a string. The exclamation point here marks that it is mandatory. So if you ask for the name it will be a string, maybe a blank string, but a string. It can't be null. The user and also the relations, you'll see that there are here. So the talk has a speaker, which is a user, and also attendees, which is a list of users. And when you are defining your schema, you define your types, and you can define how you will talk to your types. So you define queries and mutations. Queries are similar to GET requests, and mutations are similar to post, put, delete mutations. But like you define what they will do. In this case, for example, we have a talks query, which will retrieve a list of talks, a talk query, which will retrieve a talk given a slug, a speaker, which given a username will retrieve a user, and notice that those two doesn't have an exclamation point. So if you give it how can I say this, a non-existing username or a non-existing user, it should probably return null. Also, a mutation for register talk. So, for example, I could use this to register a new talk, and attend talk to say, oh, I want to attend this talk, and so on. So in here we have in the schema which Django could be using, for example, to provide data to its website and allow a back-office system to register new talks, and you guys to register that will be attending a talk. And I don't know, did you understand everything that it was happening there? But what if we can write that in pure Python? It would probably be easier to understand. So spoiler alert, we can with Strawberry. So for example, getting the same schema again, if you are familiar with data classes, we can define the same that is here as data classes. So the event becomes a data class of event. You can the relations are here as well. So the speaker is still a user, which is defined here. And when we want to expose that in Strawberry, we basically exchange the data class here with at strawberry.type. Strawberry is basically a wrapper on top of data classes, so Strawberry types are basically valid data classes. And for queries and mutations, we can write them as well as Python using Python idiomatic ways. For example, for talks, we have a Strawberry field here, a function talks, which will return a list. Oh yeah, no, it's right, it's correct. I was looking at this one. So in here, I didn't write the code for obvious reasons, but I would try to return a list of talks in here. The talk, the same, I can return here a talk or none, as I mentioned. This one is not mandatory, so none can be returned. In mutations, the same. I have a register talk here, which will receive the event, which is probably the ID, a topic, a headline, a description, which is not mandatory, and I'll return the talk after I created it, and also the attend talk. So pretty straightforward. That's, I think, it's what I love the most about Strawberry. All of these that I am showing, it's basically everything that you need to do to create a basic Strawberry application. And using that as an example, how would I query that data after that? So if I was using REST, I would send a GET request to /API/talks. In this case, I will always be sending a post, and this is basically the body of the request. So I am asking the talks. I want to retrieve the slug, the date, the topic, and the speaker. He's an entity, so I need to ask for attributes inside it, and I want to ask just the name. And an example of the resulting payload would be something like this. So I have the talks, the name of the query that I have here, and inside it, I have an array, and each object is a talk, and the Strawberry API, the GraphQL API ensures that the types here will match the ones that are exposed in my schema. Another example would be if I want to, in this one, I retrieved the list of queries. In this one, I am retrieving a single query. In this, I am passing the slug as a variable. I can define it and pass a lot of as much variables as I want. There is a way that those will be inserted in the body, but I don't want to get into details in this talk. But in here, you can see that I am returning a single result. So the first one would be used like in the Django.com website, for example. The first one would be used to list all the talks in the schedule. This one would be used to retrieve, like, oh, I got into the talk page. So I have the slug and I want to retrieve its data. So this is an example. So how can we write general GraphQL APIs using Strawberry? As I presented before, I can define those using the Strawberry type decorator. And not only I can define attributes this way, but also I can define some attributes which needs to be calculated using the Strawberry field decorator. Just like this, I want to expose an age, and since I have the birth date, I don't need to pass it again. I can just calculate it using the today's date, and it will be exposed in the same way. It will use the annotations, the type annotations in here, so it will say, oh, the age is will return an integer in my schema, and that's it. And the same for the query. I have, for example, in this case, I have a user, and I say that it will return a user, and I return the user, and just as data classes, I can just instantiate that user. The same goes for relations. In this case, I have emails, which is a list of emails, and friends, which is a list of the user itself. So when returning those, I can just instantiate the user. The friends in here are some other users. Emails is a list of emails. You can see that the same rules that applies to data classes. So for example, is confirmed in this primary defaults to false. This one has a default factor of list, so if I don't want to, I don't need to pass those, and so on. So now, how to integrate those with the Django ORM? Getting started with that, firstly, we want to be able to expose the GraphQL, especially because we want to start playing with it. And there is nothing much that we need to do. We just need to expose a view. Strawberry provides two views, a GraphQL view and an async GraphQL view, which we can just expose. GraphQL has a single entry point, so it's not like RESTful. I have /API/user/API/ orders or something like that. I just have a single one, and the query that I am doing will be sent in the post body. So I just need to define my schema. The schema will receive the queries, the mutations in here, just like this is a query. You can define a lot of queries and then merge those together to pass there. Not going to also going into details about that, but you can do that. And pass some extensions. This one is highly recommended. I will talk more about why in the end of this talk. And when doing post request to this, you will be querying data. And when doing GET request to this, as long as the GraphQL is enabled, and in here enabling it as long as the debug is enabled, you will get a screen like this, which is basically a playground in which you can introspect your schema. You can run some queries, just like the Django REST framework has a way to test there. And that's it. I just wanted to show you how it looks like. Using Strawberry together with Django. As I showed you, it's easy to know that you can basically define inside those, we call those, in GraphQL, we call those resolvers. So I have a field here, emails. It's easy to know that I can basically just query the Django ORM directly in here and instantiate those types directly using the data. So for example, let's get the user in here. I am retrieving a user, giving his primary key, and then instantiation the user type in here. But of course, that's not like you are doing a lot of, how can I say this? A lot of work in here. You need to define your model, you need to define your type, and then you need to map your model to your type. So there is, for sure, a better way of doing this, which is using the Strawberry Django integration. In this case, you will notice that the decorator is very similar to the one that Strawberry uses. You use Strawberry Django.type, but you pass the model to it. So the integration will know that this type relates to this model, and we'll do some mapping for you. In this case, we are still typing, and you can always do that. So I am still saying that the email has a string, is a string. The is confirmed is a Boolean. The user is a user type. So as I was saying, what is happening here? We are using Strawberry Django .type to define the user. Emails is a list of email type. User is a Strawberry field. Yeah, and this is important to talk about. And the query itself, you'll notice that I didn't define a function, a resolver to it, and the integration will do that for us. So when I say that I have a user which will return a user type and I assign it to a Strawberry Django.field, it will automatically create a resolver for me, which will receive a single argument called PK, which is the primary key, and retrieve the user for me. And the same goes for users here, which is typed to return a list of user type. And this one will create a resolver, which will basically query user.objects.all and return it. Of course, this is the easiest way of doing this. I can always define my own, and I will show some examples of how to add some custom filters and ordering to it, and pagination as well. But we can do better. We can actually just use the strawberry.auto annotation in here. So for example, the same as before, I have the email type in here, but instead of typing everything, I already have that typed on my ORM. I know that the email is using a char field, so I know that I should expose that as a string, and so on. So another thing that the Strawberry Django integration will do is to automatically convert, will introspect the model and change in runtime all the typings in here to their correct representation. So char field will become a string, char field which can be null will become a string or none, and so on. And also, notice about this, I will talk about this a little later, but I have a name in here which I am returning the concatenating the first name and the last name here, and I added an only first name and last name for optimization reasons. You will understand why I did this soon. So what else? Let me just see. Okay, so what else the Strawberry Django integration can do to facilitate your coding? So the Strawberry type acts as a protocol to the model, as I mentioned. So you can just decorate the type with Strawberry Django.type user, and when you say that you can return a user type, you can just return the model itself. Otherwise, like if you try, when using Strawberry directly, and you have like a user type, and you try to return something else, the GraphQL will not allow you. Basically, GraphQL dictates that the servers need to ensure that the data being returned is actually the data that it is defined in the schema. So if you say that you return a string and you try to return a Boolean or an integer, the server itself should not allow you to do that. The same goes here. So if you say that you are returning a user type, you should be returning a user type. But in this case, because the user type is decorated with the Strawberry Django.type user, you are saying that you can actually return a user and it will know how to resolve it. It has automatic resolver generation, as I mentioned as well. So for example, in this case, I have a user type and an email type. The email type, for example, has an email and annotated with strawberry.auto. When trying to resolve it, and this is how actually Strawberry works, it will retrieve the email in here, for example, using get attribute in the object. So as long as the object that I am returning for that email type, which is an email from the ORM, has the email, it will work. Meaning that I can also expose properties this way, and so on. And also, as I said before, fields inside the root query will also generate resolvers to return either single results or a list of results, like in this case. This is inside the user type, but it does the same. Strawberry Django provides you ways to filter list results. So when I say that the query in here, I am returning a list of users, this should be users, I'm sorry about that, but this is returning a list of users, and this is returning a list of emails. I can define filters, which is, the way to define those is very similar to the way of defining types. In here, I am using strawberry Django.filter, which is behind the scenes an input, which is similar to types in GraphQL, but inputs you can use to pass to as arguments to queries. And what I am doing here is to say that the email filter can be filtered by is confirmed, or the user filter itself. So filters can be nested, and the user filter can be filtered by the primary key. In this case, the email type, I am passing the filters to the decorator itself, meaning that everywhere where the email type is defined to return as a list, this filter will be inserted. Or for the user, I am passing it directly to the field. So I don't want all lists of users to get injected, to get the filter injected. So I can choose where I want. And what it will do will be to generate any schema like this. So what is defined here will in the end generate a GraphQL schema similar to this. So the email filter, and this should look like, actually, this is incorrect. This is written as type. It should be an input. I'm sorry about that. The same goes for the user filter here. But I have the email filter, the email type, the user filter, the user type, and when querying the users, you'll see that I can receive an argument, an optional argument here called user filter, and the emails, the email filter as well. And when I will show some examples in the next slide. Filters can also use lookups. So the lookups that we are used to in Django, and we can define everything in here just by passing lookups equals to true to the filter itself. So for example, in this case, when doing this, the email, which is decorated with strawberry.auto, it will be converted to a lookup filter. So I can now, instead of asking, I want to filter by this specific email, I can ask for emails that contains a given string or starts with a given string, and so on. It looks like this, although it's not. I know that it's not valid for everything. Like the range is not valid for strings, and Boolean. The range is not, of course, valid for the Booleans. But it's because the way it is defined, so it will basically create the same lookup for all the types. Be it, it can be an integer, date time, a date, object, and so on. An example how to use that. So if I want to list an email, all emails that ends in @gmail.com or @yahoo.com, I can pass the filters argument in here to the emails. Email I ends with @gmail.com. And the same, I want to list all emails for the users with the primary key 1, 2, and 3. Oh, thank you. And I can just pass, as I mentioned, the nested filtering. I can pass the user where the PK is in list, is in 1, 2, or 3. I can also ask to order the results. It's very similar to how the filters works, but in this case, what will get generated is in a none. enum of ascending or descending. And as you can see, it will be also be inserted as an argument to the list resolver as well. Of course, I can use filters together with ordering. I am just showing the examples separately to make it easier to explain. But you will probably want to use those together. And as an example, asking for the emails ordered by the user's PK in ascending way, and then for is confirmed in a descending way. And also, I can ask those types or the field itself to be exposed with pagination. In this case, there is no type that will get generated. It's just an offset and limit params will be injected inside the resolver. So really straightforward way to use that. So for example, if I want to retrieve the 50 page of a 10 results per page pagination list, I can ask it, oh, I want using an offset of 50 and limit it by 10. It also provides you a way to protect your fields using the Django permissioning system. So the integration provides some set of useful extensions in there. And the strawberry field, all strawberry fields, but in this case I am using still the strawberry Django field. You can pass some extensions which you can also write your own custom extensions, but in this case, the Strawberry Django integration provides, and this is because there used to be a project called Strawberry Django Plus, which I altered, but this is now integrated into Strawberry, the Strawberry Django integration. So again, I'm sorry about that, but you can import this and use this it like this. So for example, if I want a field, this can only be accessed by someone who is a staff. I will say that users can only be listed by staff users. By passing the EasyStaff extension in here, only staff users will be able to access it. If the user doesn't have the EasyStaff attribute equals to true, then an error will be raised. And after the users are resolved, to resolve the attributes in here, for example, to get the birth date, I am saying that the user needs to have this permission in the Django permission system to see the birth date, and the emails only if the user is a super user, and so on. But as I said, you can also define your own custom permissionings. And I should have clicked this before. Other features and highlights that it provides, so Strawberry itself and the integration is async friendly. You can use Strawberry and Strawberry Django either using WSGI or ASGI. I personally prefer ASGI. There is a lot more stuff that you can do using ASGI. Qt mutations, it provides some built-in ways to define mutations for creation, to create, update, and delete objects. Cursor pagination, you have the limit of set approach, but there are ways for you to implement your own cursor pagination using the relay spec, which I'm not going to get into details in here, but you can see the documentation in there. A query optimizer, which I am going to talk very soon now about it. And the Django debug toolbar integration, which you saw in a picture I showed before. When you run a query, you can see what the query looks like using the Django toolbar integration. And also it has integrations with Django channels to use with subscriptions, which is not covered here, but you You have queries, you have mutations, and you have subscriptions, which is a way for you to get data that gets incrementally sent to you. So some common pitfalls to pay attention. The first one, there are more than those, but I am going to mention 3 and focus on the third one, not protecting your graph, which is basically, in this example, for example, if the user is publicly exposed, if I don't pay attention to this, everyone can see the emails now, as long as they know that the emails is there to be queried. A solution to this would be to either use the permissioning extension that I mentioned before, or you can define your own resolver. And like, for example, in this case, I am checking who is the current user, and I will raise a permission denied if the user is not, the user that I am resolving here is not himself, or the user is not a staff. So only staff users or the user himself can see the emails. Everyone else, if they try to retrieve this, I'll raise a permission denied error. Another common pitfall is not thinking in graphs. So a lot of people coming from REST, I was one of those people in the past, will sometimes try to, for example, I need to expose the users and in one place, and in a back office, I want to expose the users with their emails, and they will do something like this. So create 2 types, a type for the user, a type for the user with emails, and 2 separated queries. So you don't need to do this. You can just expose a single user. As I said, the client can choose if he wants to consume the emails, if he wants to retrieve the emails or not. And if you want to protect it somehow, you can use what I explained before. Unnecessary types duplication. So for example, in here, say that I have a sale order and I have a cart. Both of them will have items in it, which will be represented by a tuple of a product and the quantity of that product. And you can see that it looks the same in the cart item and in the sale order item. Instead of duplicating this type, I can have a single type in here, product item, and say that the sale order and the cart both have a list of items, and expose it using the same type. Of course, sometimes I will have extra attributes in here, and for this I could use interfaces, which I am not covering today due to the lack of time, but think of them as like protocols in the Python typing system. And the major one that I see is the not paying attention to the N+1 issue. So GraphQL has an intrinsic N+1 issue. Don't know if you can figure out why, but that happens because the client can choose whether if he wants to include a field or not in there. So there is no way for you to know in advance if the client is going to ask for a given field. So if I am retrieving, using this example, if I am retrieving a list of users, I don't know if they are going to ask for the emails or not. And if they ask, I am going to, like if I have 1,000 users, the server will have to execute 1,001 queries, one to retrieve the list of users, and another 1,000 for each list of users for each user. We could change that to use Django's prefetch related to always prefetch the user's emails. But now, if the client doesn't ask for the list of emails, we are overfetching our database, which is better, but it's not the best approach. So how to avoid 8+1 issues? Because I am running out of time, I'm not going to mention data loaders. This is how GraphQL and Strawberry handles, and it's a nice way to handle this, and you will probably still want to use something like this for more complex scenarios. But how the Strawberry Django integration can help you solve this automatically for you. So the Strawberry Django integration, as long as you enable the optimizer extension, it will introspect the query that you are making and the Django and your model. And when you return a query set to it, it will call the query sets API to optimize that query. So, for example, if I have my user has a list of 100 columns, it will call .only to only select what I am asking for. So I am only asking for first name, last name, and something else. It will only retrieve from the database the first name, the last name, and something else. It will join any relations using select related. So when asking for the email has a user as a foreign key, so it will use select related to avoid those N+1 issues. The same goes for one-to-many or many-to-many relations using prefetch related. And you can also give it optional type hints for it, so it can know how to resolve something which is not typed in the Django ORM. And you can also give some type hints for it to use for annotations. For example, in this case, if we have this schema and we are querying it like this, so we are asking for a list of users, getting the group name, which is a foreign key from the user type, and a list of emails, and asking it to retrieve only the email, and if it is the primary email or not. The resulting query set will look something like this. So it will retrieve all the users, asking it to retrieve only the primary key and the group's name, selecting the group, asking it to select related the group, and also doing a prefetch related for the emails and asking it inside it to retrieve only the email and if it is primary or not. You can also give it some optimization hints. So as I mentioned, for example, the name, I want to expose it as a string, and this is wrong. This should be a string equals to strawberry.field, and I am annotating it with concat. Actually, this one is an example of using hints for annotations, but you can also do something like this. So the age that we mentioned before, the integration has no way to know that the age requires the birth date. So I am giving it a hint that it should load the birth date also when calling the .only, and then I can access this without. Oh, okay. So, okay, I just ran out of time, but yeah, the summary of it is that the usage is very straightforward. And actually, this was mostly the end of what I wanted to talk about. And here are some resources in case you want to know more about this. Some of those are Strawberry links, and the remaining ones are more general to GraphQL itself. And well, I thank you very much for this. Hope you all enjoyed. if you want to know more, I will be here. Feel free to reach me for any questions. And yeah, I think that's it. I'll go back to this if you want to take a look at the QR code. So thank you all.